Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the final part, at least for now, of sort of a three-part series I've been doing, sure, we'll call it that, on Russian history. So the first video I checked out is The Origins of Russian Authoritarianism by Kraut. That went way back into the past and sort of talked about the structuralism and how Russia became what it was today. Then we looked at a more modern take from NFKRZ, which I found out means no effers. I won't say it in Russian. Thank you for whoever pointed that out to me in the comment section, which was the day Russian democracy died, which happened in 1993 through the October coup, otherwise known as Black October. Thank you all very much for the tons of Russian suggestion videos. We have Geohistory's The Russian Empire, Epic History TV's History of Russia, How Did Russia Conquer Siberia, as well as a couple others. Flying Eagle, thank you for the most suggestions. And those are all really, really great. But I wanted to do something a little different with this one, just to sort of round it out and see if you guys were interested in more general Russian history. This video today comes from Natalie Kennedy. His suggestion, I have no idea, that said you should check out the Cold War channel. And when I heard the Cold War channel, I thought, all right, that's got to be Indy Nidell, right? But it isn't, though it very much looks like it's in the same style. Maybe this is a parent company or something. So this is talking about shopping in the Soviet Union, something I'm personally interested in. I thought we could sort of look more at the micro, right? We've been looking a lot at the macro, the big systems and the politics. And I thought, you know what? What was it like for people like you and I? Just shopping in the Soviet Union, something that we do every day or sometimes every other day. So without further ado, let's have a look. That was a long intro, sorry, but thank you all very much for the support. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that's the channel. Let's get into it.
We live in a consumer society. Shopping has become a part of most people's daily or weekly routine, whether it be for food or clothing, or thanks in large part to the internet and human creativity, almost anything you can think of. Also, thanks to the ubiquity of the market economy, the process of shopping is fairly similar everywhere. But what did that process look like in the Soviet Union, which operated a command economy? What could people buy and what kinds of stores were there? Were shortages real or a part of Western propaganda? I'm your host David, and today we are going to look at the Soviet shopping experience. This is the Cold War.
Cool. I hope he touches on the Eastern Bloc shopping experience a little bit too, because Eastern Germany and
just to establish this
Czechoslovakia are obviously different.
The Soviet Union employed a centrally planned command economy. This obviously resulted in a different shopping experience than what would be encountered in a country employing a free market economy. With private enterprise and businesses being prohibited in the USSR, but goods still needing to be produced, the result was one or two state-run enterprises responsible for producing those goods based on plans ordered by the central government. So, what was the direct impact and result from that? Well, unlike in the West, where there could be dozens of not only brand selections, but even choices in size and flavor of, say, toothpaste, in the Soviet Union, there would be maybe two choices of brand and little to no choice in flavor and format. With no competition, there was little incentive to differentiate the product and provide choices to consumers. Now,
that's one thing that's kind of interesting, right? Is I took marketing in my bachelor's. I'm currently pursuing a master's in it. And consumer choice, it feels like sometimes we have too much consumer choice modernly. Though to think, I've heard some people say, I wish there was less options available at the grocery store. Sometimes I go there and I don't even know what to pick. But, maybe it sort of takes a moment to think and be like, all right, well, at least we had more than two or one, right? So, yeah.
Let's talk about the shopping experience itself. For a Soviet citizen who lived in a major city, shopping centers, resembling modern malls, were a possible option, offering a variety of different products. The stores created by the Soviet government and called Central Universal Department Stores, or TSUM, existed in the major cities, including the capitals of each of the republics. The first opened in Moscow in 1922 after the nationalization of the Muir and Muralist department store in Nevskoy district, located on what was known at the time as Svetlov Ploshad, or Square, now Teatralnaya Ploshad. These TSUM stores, especially after the growth of light industry following the Second World War, and even more so after the death of Stalin, began to carry goods with a reputation for being higher in quality, although the prices were higher along with that reputation. Other than the ZOOM stores, and far more widely available to consumers, were the state universal department stores, or GUM stores.
Doesn't look too bad.
GUMs, like ZOOMs, resembled modern-day shopping malls, with the first one opened in 1923. In the years after the Great Patriotic War, again like the ZOOMs, the GUMs had a reputation for having products to sell, being among the first in the country to be allocated goods. The immediate effect from this was long queues, even for ordinary items. And
I think you could actually see some of the queues there too. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like this sort of block here, they're all waiting to go into the store. Honestly, it looks like they could be lining up for Jordans though. You know, that's a
even
modern
for
example.
Ordinary items. And what did that shopping experience look like once at the front of the line? Well, the process to purchase an item was one which certainly didn't help any queues to move quickly. Shoppers found themselves having to wait in 3 separate queues. The first line was to be able to tell the salesperson what item the shopper wanted to purchase, and then to confirm the price of the item. The shopper would then queue in a second line from which they would pay their money to a cashier who would provide them with a bill of sale indicating the amount that had been paid. The third line would then be for a different salesperson who would check the bill of sale and then, if everything was in alignment, would provide the shopper with the item they wanted. This time-intensive and highly inefficient system was designed to not only create jobs for people, but also to help prevent opportunity for any petty corruption between the shopper and the salesperson. Now, the inefficiencies and inconveniences in this system were somewhat alleviated starting in 1970, first in Leningrad and then Moscow, and then extending to other major Soviet cities with the opening of the Universam stores. These stores resembled a modern supermarket, where shoppers could browse and gather their own items, unsupervised, and then pay for them at a cash register.
So I wonder then, I remember reading something online that you spend this mildly significant amount of your life just waiting in line for things, right? I don't remember what the figure was off the top of my head, but it was really quite shocking considering you spend about a third of your life sleeping. So, you know, and I wonder if this would be the dumbest academic study ever, but I wonder how many years or months or whatever has been taken off the average Soviet citizen's life just through waiting in line. That would be ridiculous, but it would be kind of fascinating to see the difference.
This concept, likely commonplace for most of us now, was deemed quite novel at the time and had been something Khrushchev was taken by on his 1959 visit to the United States.
Yeah, there's that famous photo
to point out,
of him in
however,
an American
that the
grocery store.
Universams, like the ZOOMs and GUMs, were really only options to residents of large cities in the Soviet Union. Even in the big cities, many citizens relied on smaller stores for their shopping needs, especially for items like dairy, meat, or bakery goods. In the smaller cities and towns, these were often the only way to shop. Okay, so we've established where people shopped, but what good is a shop if it doesn't have any products to sell? Shortages were a fairly common occurrence and stemmed from the nature of a planned economy and Soviet economic policy. For those who may not be familiar, in a planned economy, all production in all industries was based on a plan, running over the course of years, which required each industry to hit certain quotas of goods. Any disruption in the achieving of the quotas could and would have impacts on other parts of the economy, which depended on the goods being produced. For example, if in year 1 of the plan 100 units of shoe leather were called for, but only 90 units were produced, the target of 100 units of shoes that were called for in year 2 of the plan would not be achievable. So it became very important for quotas to be met at every stage of production, so much so that a person's career could be at stake if the quotas were not met.
Or their livelihood.
This led to something called careerism, the falsification of production data in order to protect your own job.
And I might be wrong on this, but I think that this sort of careerism and this protection of and sort of falsification of numbers was really prevalent during Stalin's era too, where production quotas were artificially made very high, to sort of push the country into industrialization. And, you know, one thing I'm sure he'll mention, well, I hope he'll mention this, but many people perished for not meeting these quotas, or through the quotas being so harsh and the poor working conditions would have perished in that manner as well. I think it's one important thing to note.
This falsification happened in addition to corruption and sometimes outright theft of goods, and all of it added up to shortfalls in real production. Of course, this wasn't the only challenge that led to shortfalls. Another contributing factor was Soviet pricing policies. Prices of all products, including
fixed,
food,
right?
were set by the central government and were very rarely raised. People's salaries, however, did gradually increase over time. And how were these wage increases paid for? Well, Moscow just printed more money. This led to something called hidden inflation. The currency lost its purchasing power as the price of goods was not allowed to fluctuate according to market
Which would be
conditions.
bad for any sort of trade.
But it also meant that firms produced less in order to cover the cost of wage increases. To see the real effects of this hidden inflation, we only need to look at pricing at the local markets, where people bought and sold food items that had been grown privately on people's allotments, small areas of land that were privately held and were usually located not too far from where people lived. The goods grown on these allotments were sold in markets that were not regulated by the government and therefore reflected real market prices, which were normally significantly higher than the prices found in state-run stores.
Fascinating.
For those of you interested in these markets, they were technically illegal, but tolerated by the state as they helped to alleviate the seemingly omnipresent food shortage problem in the country. But back to goods shortages, these became more pronounced starting in the 1960s, and by the 1980s were particularly frequent as the weakness of the Soviet economy became inescapable. People would find themselves standing in queues for hours, waiting or just hoping to be able to buy food items. It was commonplace for people to always carry an avoska, a reusable string bag, in case they came across a line that they could join. It was not unheard of for people to join a line and only then try and find out what they were lining up for.
Wow.
Rationing was even introduced in the 1980s to help ensure some distribution to the people, and this included the big cities like Moscow and Leningrad, which typically were the last to feel the negative impacts of economic troubles. Now, just to be clear, the decision to introduce rationing in the 1980s was the result of a combination of multiple factors: poor and late harvests, the US embargo, hidden inflation, poor storage capacity. All of these things led to dwindling food supplies.
I think it's sort of an indication that a nation is failing when you have to introduce rationing, not when there's no war going on, not during a period of conflict. I think, when did Afghanistan end for the Soviet Union? Don't know off the top of my head, but that would be the only major conflict that I would think that could have been happening that would have maybe required that, but it was also a smaller conflict, so yikes.
The rationing was implemented either through the use of ration coupons issued to citizens or simply by shops restricting the amount of an item a person or family was allowed to buy. This is all pretty damning stuff and could make life complicated and difficult. But, to quote Jeff Goldblum, life finds a way. And this was the growth of the black market, or the use of foreign currency stores for those who could access them. So let's talk about the foreign currency stores first. Stalin's death in 1953 and Khrushchev's thaw that followed led to an expansion of Soviet contact and exchange with countries around the world. Coupled with this was a rapid growth in the number of new nations
Richard
as
Nixon
the
has such a weird
decolonization
face.
process took hold.
That's the only thing I'm thinking
The
of
Soviet
right now.
pursuit of new relationships led to the establishment of new embassies, consulates, and trade missions, as well as the dispatch of scientific and engineering delegations to any country that was interested in pursuing a relationship with the Soviet Union. The wages of these Soviet workers sent abroad were paid in foreign currencies, not rubles,
I see.
which often had greater purchasing power back home. Let's also keep in mind that this is the same period where foreign tourist travel to the Soviet Union was being encouraged, largely in a bid to capture those sweet, sweet foreign currency reserves. And why, may you ask, did the Soviet Union, a superpower with the ability to destroy the planet, need that foreign currency? Well, it was so it could pay for its foreign imports. The Soviet Union, even with its satellite states, was not autarkic and relied on imports to keep its people fed and its economy moving, however stagnant. This wasn't a new phenomenon either. In the 1930s, there had been the trade with foreigners stores, commonly referred to as torgsins. These had run between 1931 and 1936 and had allowed citizens to purchase goods in exchange for foreign currency or even precious metals and jewelry. Of course, we should point out that these stores sold primarily food items and were designed to take valuable assets away from the people in exchange for enough food to prevent starvation. But
so I've heard that's really interesting too, because even with its satellite states, right, which I had were sort of puppet states, if you will, that they couldn't even exercise control over their foreign currency. So I kind of wonder if the German Deutschmark, what currency did they use? Anyways, the German currency, if it had more of a value than the ruble, that they can't really exercise control over that, right? I know that, and I guess he's not going to touch on it exactly, but I know East Germany and Czechoslovakia were sort of the rich kids of the Warsaw Pact, whereas places like Romania and the Soviet Union itself and sort of Poland probably suffered more in terms of consumer choices and stuff like this. So really, really interesting about their foreign currency.
At the time that Khrushchev was in power, the idea of foreign currency stores was revived, but with a less sinister format. 2 chains were opened, what were known as the Beryozka, where foreign currency...
I can imagine a lot of corruption and a lot of really dirty-handed tactics happen through these foreign currency exchanges too.
It could be used to purchase goods as needed. The name of the store could vary from region to region, Kashtan in Ukraine or Dzintars in Latvia, for example, but generally the name Beryozka was applied and became synonymous with the stores. The story of these stores goes back to 1958, when the Council of Ministers of the Soviet Union allowed for Soviet citizens working abroad to open foreign currency bank accounts through the Vneshtorgbank, the foreign trade bank. Starting from the early 1960s, a chain of Beryozka stores was opened that took payment in foreign currency directly or via checks drawn on accounts from the Vneshtorgbank. For those without a foreign currency account, but who, for whatever reason, held some amount of foreign currency, it could be exchanged for certificates known as Vneshposiltorg, which themselves were denominated in rubles. The certificates were highly sought after. For example, in 1967, some foreign workers would save up to 40% of their salaries in order to obtain them due to their purchasing power and the quality of goods that could be purchased using them. By 1965, more than 100 Beryozka stores had been opened across the Soviet Union, located in the capitals of the republics and in the major cities of Russia and Ukraine. There was a constantly growing demand for the Beryozkas, which can be seen in the rise in equity capital of the Vneshpolistorg, which went from 1 million rubles in 1965 to 5 million rubles by 1979. And what were people buying? Well, from the available statistics from the Moscow Beryozki, for 1970, half of all revenues were from car sales, with clothing purchases ranked second at a distant 20%.
Of course.
This was followed by perfume and cosmetics with 6% of revenue, food purchases at 5.3%, and appliances at 3.2%. So you might have expected food purchases to be ranked higher? Well, a few notes on that. These stats were based on revenue, where food would have been less lucrative for the store. But more importantly, not only was this in Moscow, where shortages were less likely to happen, but the people who had the ability to access the Beryozka were normally the Soviet elite and had better access to general goods and used the Beryozka to obtain luxury foodstuffs.
I see.
Back to the statistics on the goods sold, 75% of those products sold through the Moscow Beryozka were imported goods, while the remaining 25% were Soviet-made items intended for export, so met higher quality standards than goods destined for the domestic market. And the stores were popular. In 1978, the turnover in the Moscow Vneshpolistorg stores was 257.6 million rubles, with a profit of 5.6 million rubles. Only a year later, this had increased to 274.4 million rubles, with a profit of 8 million rubles, and by 1984, they had a turnover of 325 million rubles and made a profit of 13.6 million. That is a lot of kasha.
I really wish they'd say that in like US dollars or something at the time, or modern. Yeah, I really wish, because I don't really know if that's a ton. I don't know what a 1-to-1 ruble to US dollar. Still, interesting the amount of growth that goes on under this semi-free market-ish kind of system, eh?
So, who shopped at the Berioska stores? Well, foreigners who had foreign currency, naturally, but that was a small percentage of business. Most Berioska customers were Soviet citizens who earned money while abroad. They could be working as diplomats, as foreign correspondents for Soviet newspapers, as specialists or engineers. All of these positions were coveted not only for the ability to travel abroad, but the opportunity to earn foreign currency, which could be saved and brought home to be used at Berioska. There were two...
I wonder if soldiers that were abroad would be paid in the foreign currency as well, or if they would be paid in rubles. Probably rubles, though, because there'd be quite a lot of soldiers that were abroad in some sort of way. Interesting.
Major advantages of shopping there: time and quality. For example, I just mentioned that 50% of revenue was through the sale of cars.
Massive
this was
portrait
because
of Lenin
instead of having to wait possibly for years for a car through the regular process, a car could be purchased almost immediately through the Berioska. And the models bought would be ones destined for export, with slightly more powerful engines, or nicer trim levels and features, like 4 headlights instead of only 2. And buying a car this way proved to be a popular option for those who could take advantage. In 1970, the Moscow branch of the Dnepropetrovsk sold 7% of all cars sold in the Soviet Union that year.
Wow.
Okay, so what other goods were being purchased through the Berioska? Well, household technology items were very popular as well. With Khrushchev's push to increase housing, millions of Soviet citizens found themselves in need, or in want, of things like TV sets, cameras, vacuum cleaners, refrigerators, and other items of otherwise convenience.
I think you can survive
These
a nuke
types
in
of
that
items
thing,
were
right? I think
readily
Indiana
available
Jones
for
did
purchase
that.
at the Berioska. Initially, it was only Soviet-made brands, but after 1965, imported goods also became available with their reputation for better quality. And this wasn't just tech goods, but also things like furniture, clothing, and food. And where were these goods coming from? Well, they were coming from other East Bloc nations, like Czechoslovakia, East Germany, and Hungary, all of whom had reputations for higher quality manufacturing than that found in the Soviet Union.
Fascinating.
So the Beryoskas were popular, but, and here is the but that at least some of you have been waiting for, the Beryoskas weren't an option for most citizens.
Yep.
In order to shop there, people had to have access to foreign currency, which was very difficult in the controlled nature of the Soviet Union. One thing we didn't mention was that the foreign currency certificates were non-transferable between citizens. Ivan, the lathe turner from Gorky, who had never left his own oblast and had no foreign or party connections, had no access to foreign currency, unless he went to the black market, but that ran a series of risks of its own, with a variety of potential consequences. So that neat little transition does bring us to that perennial outlet of Soviet shopping, the black market. Generally, if somebody needed something that was unavailable in shops, or the buyer was not willing to wait for hours to get the item, they could deal with a farsovщик, a black market dealer. Goods available could range from American jeans to Yugoslavian boots to sausages, depending on how connected the farsovщик happened to be. Of course, these black market traders were conducting illegal activity, but normally operated under the protection of local party bosses and even the Soviet economic police.
Right. And that just goes back to the sort of corruption themes that we've seen throughout the sort of history, right? Is that it always permeates to the top, right? Always, always, always.
And why would these people in positions of power and influence provide protection for people breaking the law? Why, for bribes, of course. What better way to supplement your income than accepting payoffs to ignore or even protect illegal activity?
Yep.
But it wasn't just about the bribes, although those were important. Thanks to the chronic shortages, which got worse over time, the black market also provided an outlet for Soviet citizens to purchase needed items. The authorities recognized that if they enforced the letter of the law and shut down the farsovщик, they would have to face angry citizens unable to get even the basics of life. By the end of the Soviet Union, the Soviet Interior Ministry estimated that the annual turnover of the black market was somewhere between 110 and 130 billion rubles per year.
Billion?
That is also a lot of kasha. So,
wow, that's almost like the GDP of a small country. Wow, 130 billion was being bought on the black market.
That's a look at Soviet shopping. In a society that preached equality for all,
Yeah,
a
it really
two-tier
wasn't.
system emerged with the top tier only being accessible to the privileged. As the economy stagnated,
Funny how it always works like
management
that.
and corruption took hold, shortages became more and more frequent, forcing people into the grossly inefficient and unproductive system of queuing or driving them to make purchases on the black market, something which robbed the state of revenue and therefore exacerbated and magnified the problems in the command economy, which drove the shortages in the first place. We hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and to make sure you don't miss all of our
Fascinating.
future episodes,
Cool.
please make sure you subscribe to our channel and have brought your Avoska with you in case you see a line you can join which may be selling access to the bell button. Once
Nice.
you've found out how much the bell button is, then you can queue to pay for the bell button, and then and only then can you line up again to show your receipt to the salesperson so that you can now press the bell button.
There
We
you
can
go.
be reached via email at the
Perfect. Thank you, bearded indie Nidell with glasses. Well, thank you very much for joining me with that one. That was fun. It was cool to see sort of more of a micro, right? Not always look at the big systems and the big politics and everything like that, but rather how was it like for everyday people like you and I. If you want me to check out the Epic History TV video on Russia, it's like 47 minutes long, so I'll probably break it into 2 parts. Let me know. I'll pin a comment and then just hit like on that comment if you want me to do those videos. Yeah, other than that, thank you very much for joining me. Thought it was a great video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take care.